So I just wanted to give a basic explanation of the scientific method and what you're going to be quizzed or tested on. But also, the things that I'm quizzing and testing you on are things that are just really important to know for the scientific method. Not necessarily for like school, but being a logical person who makes good decisions in their life. So, to start with the scientific method, we have questions and observations. I think it's extremely important for us to know that being out in the world, seeing things, experiencing things, and getting your hands on things is really important compared to someone who just sits inside all day and clicks through the internet and just kind of, is lost in that inside world. The outside world is a place where you make observations and you start to question things, not just scientifically, but like in society. Related to like social values or related to like the actual landscape of nature. We need to observe things in order to come up with questions. And once we start to come up with questions, we get better and better at asking questions and figuring things out and then going through this scientific method. So, good questions lead to good hypotheses. A hypothesis is going to be usually something that starts with an if, then, because when you're in middle school. But once you get to high school and college, the hypothesis is really just something that you modify and you make better and you make better and better, but it has to be something that can possibly be proven wrong. The example I always give is the sky. So if your question is, why is the sky blue? And your hypothesis is that we live inside the eyeball of a giant, then you're never going to be able to come up, or you probably won't. You probably won't be able to come up with an experiment and procedures that's going to lead to quality data, because that question isn't really necessarily answerable, right? So almost like why are planets orbits around the sun perfect circles? Well, an orbit around the sun isn't a perfect circle, so you'll never find the answer to that. All right, so a good question leads to a good hypothesis. All right, and a hypothesis is just a really good idea that you're going to try and back up and find evidence for, consistent evidence for, through some type of experiment with really good procedures. All right. So that leads us to procedures. One of the major things you got to know for this class is that when we write procedures, we want them to be thorough yet concise. What does that mean? Thorough means that there's enough information there that I can just read the directions and complete the experiment the same way that a person in Germany could complete the experiment, the same way that the person who made the experiment wants me to complete it. So thorough means that there's enough information that I'm not going to make any silly mistakes, but then you want it to be concise. Nobody likes when directions just go on and on and on and on and on. You want to use as few words, you want it to be as concise as possible, but you also want it to be very thorough so that nothing is lost in the process of creating and setting up an experiment. So procedures need to be thorough yet concise. The experiment is going to be something that you really just follow the procedures for. So we usually kind of group these two together, but the experiment is really the part where you're going to be collecting information, collecting data, and then from there, you analyze the data. And analyzing the data just means that you comb through it and you try and find things that were consistent and things that were inconsistent. And with that data analysis, you loop back to your hypothesis. Did the statement that you made in your hypothesis, is it supported wholeheartedly, completely by your data analysis taken from your experiment? And then once you get an idea that locks in and makes a lot of sense, you can write a conclusion about that. But let's say that your data analysis goes against what the hypothesis says. So your hypothesis, I think that, or not I think, but the sky is blue because we're in the blue eyeball of a giant. The data does not support that evidence at all. So we need to come up with a new hypothesis or maybe even a new question that we need to answer. So the sky is blue because light refracts through the atmosphere and the red light escapes back out into space for the most part, while the blue light cuts through the atmosphere. We can create some type of procedure and experiment inside a laboratory that would support that with the data, and we would look at the analysis, right? We would analyze the data in order to form a conclusion that ties all of these different steps together. Hopefully that makes sense.